Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of VNture podcast. Today, we're going to be continuing something we did from a month ago, where it's a series of Readports, where MR and I will discuss some of the titles we've been reading over the past month and share our thoughts and ongoing criticisms and praises for the titles. MR certainly has had a busy month, so I'm going to hand things off to him so he can talk about one of his favorite titles in a title in a favorite series. I don't know yet if it's his favorite, so we'll find out.
Yeah, it was a long time coming, especially since I knew, recording the previous report, it's coming. I already made arrangements. I booked as much as free time as possible for whenever the title will drop. I'll start reading immediately. I won't let off. And the title I'm talking about is Rans 9, Helmanian Revolution. Oh boy. I don't even know where to begin. Maybe let's start with the basics. As the name suggests, is the 9th in the mainline series of runs. This time it takes place in a titular Helmanian country. And as again title suggests, the main point is to stage a revolution, to overthrow the corrupt government that contributes to how the country is falling apart. You read this from the perspective of a very hedonistic hero who, with his absurdist approach and whimsical approach, solves all the problems along the way. And what a journey it is. It's very hard to describe because that title in Alisoft is written in such a perplexing way. And I mean it in a multiple different aspects. I never know quite how to describe the series, be it for newcomer or veteran alike. I always struggle how to say it, because on one hand you can approach it very reductive. It's a funny great man story, but this is far from the core of the issue here.
The way I've understood it, as, someone looking in from the outside who knows very little about the Rance series, is that the series all revolves around one man named Rance, and he is an adventurer in a fantasy feudal setting, but he only cares about getting laid. And through a whole bunch of funny adventures and serious moments, he ends up saving the day more often than not. Is that right?
You sum it up pretty well. It is so much more complex than that.
Oh, surely.
Because even it's very hard to call him a good guy. It's very easy, judging by the morals, his actions, his approach, attitude, to see him as an asshole, a person who is very stupid in a way. He's bad. So he's a bad guy in a very childish way. And one of the strengths of this series specifically is contrast. Because while he is maybe not the best person ever and has very much a bad guy qualities, when you meet a truly evil people in this world, you are frozen in fear, to say the least. Because by contrast, he's so much better than the alternative. Which is not the best endorsement, but still, somehow in that world that doesn't take itself seriously in some of the aspects, it just works. What this title in particular achieved, which is something I did not think possible, other male characters had so much agency and so much development, you could argue they could overthrow his role as protagonist in this title. And this is always funny to me. When it comes to VNs, especially the ones that focus on conquerable heroines. So you have a route, be it in fantasy, be it harem, be it romance stories. A lot of the titles don't really have male characters. They focus so much on females outside of MC and his close circle of family and or best friend character. Rarely do you have many other males. Whereas there's so many male characters, running joke very early in the game is that Rance feels uncomfortable with the lack of women around him. And that's so weird in something that is perceived as very perverted game about guy who only cares about getting laid.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Many other romance visual novels will only have one or two male characters, and they're usually stock characters with very little agency in a story. But I'm actually very impressed. I never knew that Rance has a whole bunch of male characters. That must make for a very wide cast, right?
Yes. Maybe this title had, again, given the retrospective of the entire series, and comparing to the previous installment, that being released 8, called Rance Quest, this one is more focused and has smaller cast of character than the previous one, because there is a singular focus in singular country on singular event and everybody involved in it. But that being said, there's so many male characters, and a lot of them have relationships with females that makes Rance mad, because all girls are his in his warped mind. So, think about that, because what I also added to this conversation, in comparison to other VNs, is a lot of the time, not only do they not feature other males, but the idea of other males also having relationships with females was also non-existent in those romance stories. But here, on a daily basis, he struggles with, he has a girlfriend, he has a wife, and he loves someone. Those are real things. Other people have relationships, and he has to deal with it. He's not, despite what he wants it to be, he's not center of attention all the time, everywhere, all the time. That's not realistic.
Pretty rare for a visual novel main character.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned you've been looking forward to this for a long time, right? Was there something particular about this that really piqued your interest? Or is it?
There are two aspects to answer this question correctly. One is that it took a long time to translate. From the announcement to translation, it took a long time. So that's why I looked forward to that. The second part being, when I said specifically, this is a 9th entry to the main lane series, is because at certain point, and throughout the VN industry, somewhat of a legendary tale, when Alisoft, the company that made this series, faced bankruptcy, they wanted to go with a bang. And this is when they created what is called Kichiko Runs. That is a spin-off, currently regarded as a spin-off, that contained all the ideas they had. This saved the company, and a lot of people to this day claim that's a VN ahead of its time. It was that big and that ambitious. Now, in the modern timeline, revised, they tell the same stories, expanded, that they did propose and told during the now defunct and de facto retconned Kichikou runs. So since I did read Kichikou, I had some bits and pieces to expect. And given that Kichikou was a world conquest, they had incorporated a lot of countries in that conquest story. Whereas the series itself tends to focus on one installment has one country, this being Hellman. The third installment has another country, the first another country, the sixth another country. So those stories that I did get to experience, I think it was 5 years ago when I read Kichikou. Now I get it in the modern design with expanded ideas, and some of them revised to such a degree I got completely caught off guard what happened.
So you basically had a taste of all of this world building and continuity. You've been stewing on this for years, waiting for the title to release. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's MR special.
I can't deny that. You caught me red-handed. But there is also a certain pleasure when it comes to solving a mystery, when you piece together a series that got translated out of order of release. Because remember, the most popular, that was the highest in VNDB and similar sites, was for the longest time number 7th. And that was also the first one that got a fan translation. And also was the first one I read. So, okay, now in retrospective, I started with 7, then went back with the biggest one, which is after 4, before 5, that retconned it. So now I have in my mind all the jumbled story pieces from that time, those 2 titles I started with, until in the recent years when Manga Gamer started licensing and releasing officially translated titles. Now I read number 1, number 2, reading 4, read 5, 6, 7, 8, and now 9.
Making your way up in the world.
Exactly. So those initial impression and jumbled story bits, I slowly pieced together all across those different and scattered throughout episodes, as it were. And there is some, I have to say, there is some euphoria when it clicks. And there were some of those revelations that I had like, now I get it, okay. Something that kept bothering me and seemed like a plot hole actually had an explanation. It just took it so long for me to piece it together.
Nice. And so you're definitely... I forget if you mentioned if you're still reading it or if you finished Trans 9, but of course, it sounds like you are fully enjoying it as much as you expected.
I did finish it a week ago.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I did. Again, since I went ahead and took a vacation because I knew I will be absorbed into this title, I read it in about a week, give or take, maybe a little bit longer, and I fully completed 100% everything. I am done with 9. But I am not done discussing 9 because there is one aspect I wanted to tell you about, because I feel like I might have mentioned that before to you when I was talking about this series, in particular number 7, Sengoku Runs, is about routing and route order. This title, in my opinion, delivers the best approach for routes in an otherwise serialized title. It has to have a canon. So how do you mix? How do you manage to mix canon story with 8 endings? Now that's an interesting conundrum, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and how they did it, in essence, is improving on the formula of 7. And it's just a brief recap for you, so you remember. Number 7 said, your first ending you achieve must be true ending and you cannot avoid it. That's the only ending that is allowed on the first playthrough. And the same is true here. First ending you will achieve is always the canon true ending. After which you can go back, reload a previous save, and they specifically made a special slot for you to have before the final conclusion. And then you can get access to the special routes dedicated for each heroine. And depending on your affection level and events you had with those, that explore that possibility.
Yeah, so there would be the true route that would be fixed first, and then after that you can replay the game and see bonus content of other routes.
Yes. Yeah. But that's not the end, because they improve on that in a very interesting way. Okay, so what tends to happen in story-driven games after you finish, and I mean it in VNs, but it's sometimes also in RPGs. But what happens is a credit roll or epilogue, in which you have slides, or in case of VNs, events that tell, oh, this character after the events of the story went the separate way somewhere to the journey, right? Are you familiar with that concept?
Somewhat.
Okay, so this is exactly what they did. So you finish the game, you have an epilogue, and the epilogue goes through your entire party and tells you the story, okay? After the revolution was over, they went north, and they went home, and they started a bakery. So they kept telling the story. And then it ends. You go back to the save point, you choose a heroine, you do her ending, and you see how it would have unfolded given those permutations. But once you two finish that route, which is not canon, the resolution isn't canon, but the character development gets in some way incorporated to the true route, because in the main menu, the epilogue changes to reflect that. And it's highlighted. You can always see the epilogue, how it ended. Every single time you finish an ending, a route, epilogue gets updated. And if you watch epilogue, some of the character development from routes got incorporated to true ending.
Pretty cool. Okay. So it's a very interesting blend of keeping the side routes, what is it, canon to the main ending, even when they technically haven't been done in this playthrough. Okay. It sounds like a nice way of building all that bonus content into something everlasting.
Exactly. And most importantly, when it comes to routes, they got a resolution. So for example, you picked a character, you started her route, her problems, and then you fixed it. The end. How True End incorporated is it started the development, but it hasn't got the conclusion as you read it, as if you were in a route. So that's a very interesting topic. So those interesting elements about those heroines got incorporated into True Route to continue onwards with the runs 10. And I have to say that's a very intriguing. That make it so fun to hunt for all those route endings and see all the little things that changed during the epilogue by incorporating routes in what was original true end to the updated finale.
Very cool. Very cool. It gives a very neat, huge bow on top when you finish the whole thing, right?
Exactly. I was
Cool,
very impressed. Cool. I'm very impressed.
Mm-hmm.
Every time when I was talking about the reversal of the typical structure of routes, and after which you exhaust all the routes, you get true ending. And runs always try to circumvent that, says, okay, since I have a serialized story, you need to know the basics, you need to know the canon, after which you can explore all the ifs and what ifs, what could have been. So I am impressed how they try to always improve upon the formula.
Mm-hmm. It's a series updating with the times. Very cool.
Exactly. So that's something that I was impressed by a lot. What I wasn't impressed by is bad ends, but I don't like bad ends ever, so it's just I don't know what to say.
That's a topic for another day, is it?
Yeah. I as a rule of thumb, I don't like bad ends ever. Even when arguing that bad ends could enrich experience, for example, giving perspective what could have gone wrong, and now you appreciate that it didn't. I don't know. I experienced so few meaningful bad ends, and this title was one of those overly brutal, crazy, something went wrong, let's redo it kind of deals. I'm like, that's one I didn't like, but that's my gripe, my personal take on bad ends as a whole.
Well, yeah, they are. They are called bad ends, and I suppose they're for good reasons.
Yeah, I mean, for me, bad ends are bad. I don't want them, okay?
No, keep them out. It's your penalty for failing a battle. So
yeah,
do better next time.
Yeah, it was pretty much that here. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. MR has had one heck of a month apparently, and he's been having a lot of fun. I finished up reading a short VN called Selene Apoptosis that I mentioned in last month's Readport. At the time, I thought it was good, and it was building up the tension so well. It is a horror VN, and I'm a wuss for horror. And this one was hitting me real hard, just from all the tension in the ambient music and all the dark lighting that kept hiding everything out of view. And I was also in the middle, when we made the recording last month, I was in the middle of one story arc about two characters and their crumbling relationship, and how this very mysterious, somewhat paranormal stuff was happening as well. And this was like the highlight of the VN, although I didn't know it yet. I finished up the title not too long ago. And unfortunately, my biggest problem with it is that none of the events make sense. Like, it's one thing for a title to have an open-ended ending, where it wraps up and you still have lingering questions, and it's the sort of, well, maybe, or what if, or I don't know about that. Like, that's good. You want to leave it hanging on the reader's mind. But instead, in this VN, it was the sort of questions like, what the hell did I just read?
Oh, God.
It's the kind where, like, I'm not even sure what the main storyline was, and now things ended, and it's just more like the story stopped. And there's all sorts of events that I'm like, what did those have to do with anything? And who is this main character author guy? And what was up with the cat at all? There is so much confusion in my mind when I'm trying to tell anyone about this VN. So, I mean, that's a shame, because if this VN had an actual backbone to it, like some sort of structure to the stories, then this would have been fantastic. It's got all the bells and whistles, and there's clearly a bunch of love put into all the art and music and graphics and animations too. So it's just such a shame that there's no real meat to the bone here. I mean, I would still recommend it. I still enjoyed it. As you're reading minute to minute, and you're getting caught up in the moment, and it's super scary, and your heart's pounding. It's just now that it's over, and I look back on it, and I see how pointless a lot of the scenes are, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth, you know?
So if I gather it correctly, it's a very intense experience, but ultimately, after all is said and done, after all the dust settles, is very hollow in what it wanted to tell.
Yes. It's kind of like if you go into a haunted house, and then you dive into the dark hallways, and then there's just sporadic flashing lights, and it's the people with a chainsaw bursting out of the hall, and you're like, oh my god, this is scary, this is amazing. And then you get out, and you can kind of look at everything from above, from like the security cameras or whatever, and you're like, oh my god, this was the lamest hallway I've ever seen.
Yeah, okay.
It was just one room with threadbare decorations and stuff, and you're like, why did I enjoy that? But you think back, and you're like, in the moment, it was hype. It was super scary. That's very much what. But this was a free visual novel available on Steam. So, to be fair, it is still very much a cut above what anyone would expect. So I still enjoyed it.
When it comes to VNs, especially the free ones, I always grade them differently because there's a different kind of standard from which you grade such as title, and maybe ultimately what failed is, okay, they put all effort on the atmosphere and the horror vibes. Ultimately the story just was one giant farce to facilitate those moments, and the testament for that is even your recommendation that it is such a exhilarating and unique experience you would recommend trying, even though ultimately the story doesn't really chime that well.
Yes.
I have to say, when it comes to this series in particular, and by this I mean Readports, this is the first case we have of a report about how your experience changed from the previous episode to this one. So it was very interesting hearing how hyped and scared you were before to how you're sighing like it was like, yeah, it was just story. It's interesting, I have to say. The one thing I did remember, you're talking about how mysterious the idea was that there is such an enigmatic character for which even the title, the game itself, tried to reference as a cat instead of a human. What's still with that?
That's one.
Surely there was a payoff to that, right?
No, see. I mean, yeah, that's how the VN starts, is that there's a struggling author sitting in his dark home on a rainy night. Then he hears knocking on the door, and eventually he goes up to answer it, and the narration keeps describing a cat, like an actual just normal animal cat. But then obviously you can see here in the visuals and whatnot that it's some anime cat girl. Very, very much a young girl. And yet the narration keeps referring to it as a cat, as the cat scurried in and then drank milk from a faucet. And at the time, I thought it was great because it was a very strange disconnect between the visuals and the written text. And I thought, oh, this is a horror VN. It plays into it very well. And then once again, it ends and I'm like, I have no idea what the point of that was. I really wish there were several things like that in this VN that built to something. But instead, there's a whole lot of isolated events. So all in all, I really
see.
like Selene Apoptosis, but
Uh-huh.
in hindsight, I really wish I could have enjoyed it more.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I understand.
No, yeah, those are my thoughts about it.
Yeah. Speaking of titles we might hear on the next Readport, I'm currently reading Runs 4. So after finishing Runs 9, one plot point was left in my mind. There is so much background for this world, and now it became important. Where the hell did it start? There, again, there was a civilization called Holy Magic Sect that came to prominence during the course of revolutionary story in 9. So that backstory became very relevant. So I'm like, okay, wait, who, why, where, how? I had to revisit all the entire series, and I remember, I skipped 4 because 4 has never been modernized. So it's a very, very old version. Yet recently, I think it was about a month before the release of Runs 9, the creator of the entire series has updated Runs 4 with its few fixes. And as much as he could, modernize it to work on Windows 10. So I thought, okay, after 9, let's head back, let's fire off the abandonware, because it's so old, it's actually abandonware, the entire game, and try to play it. I am in the middle of playing it. I encountered some major bugs already.
Oh dear.
I lost a lot of progress multiple times.
Oh no.
So on the technical front, it has a lot of problems. But the story is so hilariously run, I just can't stop laughing every time. One of the best humor when it comes to that series is both his ridiculousness, how such hedonistic person can achieve by sheer audacity such great and heroic acts just by pure coincidence and just for being so brash and straightforward. But on the next level of that, let's say, joke is when he meets people who understand him, they manipulate him so hard it's not even funny. They know how to stroke his ego, they know how to appeal to what he wants, and it reads so fantastical how much trouble he goes through just because he's so stupid and naive.
Oh dear.
And there's a lot of that here in Runs 4, when he meets people who said, "Are you the great Runs, the best adventurer of the entire land, that is the strongest, the smartest, and the most cleverest one of all?" And he's like, "Yeah, you're describing me. That's me." Oh my god, and he gets manipulated in the most crazy way possible.
Oh my goodness. I never knew he was quite a blockhead like that. That just makes it so much funnier.
Yeah, but it takes a certain person who understands how to guide him. And then it's just so funny until the point he recognizes it and he has a temper tantrum of what the hell is going on? Oh my, it's so funny to me. And there's a lot of that. And it's 90s humor, I would say. Some of it is... there's a very specific humor of him narrating some of the obstacles he faces. So, for example, he shouts at the door, and then the narration continues and says, "In a spiteful turn of events, the door remains shut." What? What did you expect? What did you expect? What the hell?
It must have a lot of charm then. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
That's perfect. Yeah. That's perfect. But I don't think you'd recommend anyone start with this, though, based on all the
Oh
bugs.
no.
Oh.
Yeah. The bugs was super problematic. So far, I lost all the progress, and it's very clunky in a way. It has no autosave or quick save system, and has gameplay as all the runs games have. And when you lose the battle, you will lose all the progress. And while the modern and mainline remastered game have a lot of autosaves, quick saves, this title has absolutely nothing. So you lose so much progress, and you got so backwards in your gameplay time. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It is so old.
That's how old video games used to be. There was no mercy out of them. It was
no mercy.
You get to save here, and you go on a 1-hour excursion to this dungeon, and you better not die before you make it back to town and save again.
And you know what's funny? You can even save at any point, except for when current battle is in progress. That's the one you can't. But whenever you're traveling, you can save any time. It's just so annoying to save. You have to go through so many menus to open the save menu, finally confirm, yes, I want to save. Now, yes, I want to go out of those 5 menus I went through to open this. And I know they like their humor. They like the fact that you don't save, you ask a goddess a permission and offering to save the state, something like that. They have some lore jokes about it. And obviously the goddess will comment, you're a funny person, Rans. So every time you close the saving, you get a comment, dialogue. It's so cumbersome. Which is funny because the same nature of even save state and having a system goddesses in game, it's kept to this day. It's just one click now. One pop-up message or comment about your adventure and click save, done. One click. But back in the day, you had to open one menu, open camp, open call, pick who you're calling the goddess, what do you want to call, you want to save, you pick the save slot, she comments. Oh my god, it takes forever.
You know what takes even longer?
What?
Redoing all that story content you...
Don't remind me.
That's what you get for losing.
Yeah.
Alright.
Get good.
Yes. So hopefully you continue to enjoy that in the future.
Yeah.
And that will have to be the end of today's episode. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you enjoyed hearing about us talking about some of the titles we liked and might have disliked along the way. And hopefully we can continue doing this Readport series, so you should see one next month of what Emor and I have been up to.
Yeah, and to all our listeners, see you next time.